just pulling off of the narrative that I built at the conference, which is we need to thicken the dialogue around a theology of place. And
Hmm.
I don't want to be naive to say we should never leave your hometown.
Yeah.
But I want to make it more normative that you could stay.
Yeah.
And what are the legitimate ways of doing that?
Hello, you're listening to The Sower, a podcast of the Ciceronian Society. The Ciceronian Society equips and encourages Christian scholars to serve the church as a center of cultural and civic renewal. To learn more about us, our events, our journal, Pietas, to sign up for our newsletter and make your tax-deductible gift, go to ciceroniansociety.org. We have a busy year ahead, so definitely stay tuned. We got our fall symposium this October. It'll be October 22nd to the 24th, 2026 in Holland, Michigan. Our 2027 spring conference will be at Regent University in Virginia Beach, March 11th through 13th, and the proposals for that are due September 1, 2026. If this is probably coming out in early June, you're probably late for the fall symposium proposal period, but go ahead and contact us if you're interested and you're getting this. There's a chance there might be some space. We'll also be launching the Logres Institute for Classical Studies this fall. More on that in other episodes. I'm Josh Bowman, Executive Director of the Ciceronian Society. Before we go any further, I'd like to open with a prayer. Heavenly Father, we ask that in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ, you would bless this conversation and guide us by your Holy Spirit, that all we may say and do will bring glory and honor to you. Amen.
Amen.
Today, I'm very excited to be joined by my friend, Dr. Nick Ellis, founder and CEO of Christian Halls International, which is reimagining collegiate education through local learning communities that form virtuous people who contribute to flourishing places. That's a quote from the website. Nick has also founded or led various organizations in North America, Brazil, Africa, and Europe. Dr. Ellis was educated at the University of Oxford, receiving a Doctor of Philosophy and Master's in Theology and Religion, as well as Trinity Western University with a Master's of New Testament, and also at Union University with the Bachelor's of Biblical Languages. Christian Halls International was also a Tulia sponsor at our recent annual conference in Omaha, where Nick delivered a beautiful, moving talk about this organization and what it's doing and what it can do. So welcome to the show, friend.
It's so great to be here with you, and it's always a privilege and a pleasure. Thanks for having me on, Josh.
Yeah, that was a long intro. I didn't when I do it, I don't realize how long it is until I start to say it and run out of breath. All right. Well, we last brought you on the show in February 2025. That's episode 31 for those following along. We focused a lot on the overall vision for Christian Halls and its relation to the subject of place, which we'll come back to. Um, but we've nearly doubled our subscribers since then, which is a good thing. So I thought maybe just real quick, give us a quick review or a quick summary of what Christian Halls International is for those who may have missed that previous
Mhm.
episode.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing that's already been a year ago, and Ciceronian is going gangbusters. And I have to say, by the way, that the conference in Omaha was by far my and my staff's favorite conference the entire year. If any of the listeners are even thinking about not attending, you just need to come and be part of it. We love it. It's a deep formational community, and it's the kind of people that we want to hang out with. So, Josh, thanks for all the work you do in organizing that conference. And when it comes to Christian Halls, it really is the kind of ecosystem that we want to be part of, the kind of people we want to be part of as we try to sharpen what we're doing. Christian Halls International, our tagline, human formation, local flourishing, and civilizational renewal. Each of those three things are kind of deeply embedded as kind of the three strands of our DNA, and we could spend hours on each one of them. I
Mhm.
think we really spent most of the time on the human formation side last time, which was what should education look like? How can we look at better ways of doing education? And described a little bit about our model, which is based around kind of a regionalization of the Oxford and Cambridge tutorial model. So the way that Oxford works, those listeners who may or may not know, is you're getting a degree from the university, but you are based in a hall or a college. Most of your instruction is done in tutorial. So small groups or one-on-one, one-on-two. Yes, there's lectures happening all over the campus at any given time, but it's not really a lecture-based model. It's really deeply informed by the tutorial model. And so, your C.S. Lewis's and your J.R. Tolkien's, of course, are all famous examples of people who have lived in that ecosystem and have provided that kind of tutorial-based approach. After several years living in Oxford, primarily to find a way of doing international education in a way that didn't just put all of our students into a plastic online section somewhere, we were we said there's got to be a better way of doing distributed education that brings high quality formation into local places all around the world. And so we partnered with now over a dozen universities. They are the Oxford in our system. They are the accreditation institution. They hold the faculty, the formal faculty, syllabi, those kind of things. And yeah, there's lots of online content that they may push to us. We just don't trust it to form good humans.
Mhm.
We deeply believe in a person-to-person uh, uh, formational event that's in the tutorial. And so what we did is we went all over the world, mainly East Africa and Brazil, and we have over 700 learning communities that we have founded or help found. And we are basically looking for tutors. Those that kind of I remember my favorite tutor in Oxford, Mr. Nick King, actually never got his doctorate at Campion Hall. And when I was doing my Latin and my Greek, um, his tutorials are famous, right? He just deeply, deeply loves the text. Actually has a translation of the New Testament that's used all over town. And the privilege of sitting with him multiple times a week, discussing, debating, engaging, preparing for my examinations. But that tutorial kind of space is what we wanted to try to build as an alternative to either, on the one hand, the large 700 person freshman class at the kind of state universities, or on the other hand, the remote asynchronous online options that many students have kind of been subjected to. And now in the age of AI, seeing that those are becoming increasingly just watered down, and you have a student submitting a AI generated paper to a faculty member who's grading it with AI, and effectively you have two computers talking to each other, and everybody knows that the ROI is just simply not there anymore, and it's not a
Mhm.
formational space. And so what we committed to was going community by community, town by town, and building what we call halls of learning. We can't call it a college here in the States because there's legal reasons for that. But these halls, which are basically human gathering points for the Christian intellectual tradition. And since we talked, Josh, over the last 12 months, I've spent over 500 hours in that little Cessna 182. I've landed in 121 small towns across North America. We will have 300 sites operational by the end of this year. And really, it's just based around this local presence of people who say, yes, I want to be involved in deep, rich Christian human formation, but I want to do it from my place. I want
Mhm.
to do it for the good of our place. And I want to do it in an incarnational environment that the state university, or going away to even a very good private Christian university, is just a different kind of place. And so
Yeah.
that really is the heart of Christian Halls, is fully accredited post-secondary education from dual credit, bachelor's, master's, PhD, and now a very significant line of skilled trades. Taking all of that kind of formational accreditation and content and those kind of things, and localizing them into real places, and partnering with people who live in those places and want the good of those places and love their local people, and say our affections are going to be turned here. And we begin to see that grow. And there's a significant number of people who are interested in that. And now we believe it's our job to start to thicken that conversation, because we've kind of been some voices in the wilderness, out there kind of throwing these ideas around, and now they're starting to stick. And the reason that we went to Ciceronian this last year was really to invite the fellows and the members. What would it actually look like to get serious about a human formational activity that deeply contributes to the flourishing of local places, and that at scale can actually renew a civilization? So that's where we're at, and love to talk more about that.
Yeah, the growth is so encouraging, and I'm not super surprised by it. But one of the things that always comes up when I've talked with people when you're not around, and I say because the first time I heard about Christian Halls, I got really excited. It's like, this is great. This is exact. I didn't think about this before, but intuitively, when I hear you describe what you're doing and why you're doing it, it makes sense to me. But I like the fact that you're saying, we need to thicken this conversation because I think that that's what happens when I tell people like that sounds right. Why does it sound right? Right? It's we've the norm. You use the phrase the normative assumptions about education. They've what is what we thought what education was supposed to look like is changing, and we're also intuitively seeing that like what we've been doing for all this time is not working anymore. If it
Yeah.
isn't broke, don't fix it, but it's broken.
Yeah.
And so we need to do something different. But I want to, before I get to that focus on place, I actually want to ask you a really important question that we face here at Ciceronian all the time. Is you're very explicit about being a Christian organization, but you and I
Hmm.
both know, I'd be interested to know how this compares to the context in Africa and Brazil, actually. But when we say Christian in America, it's often wrapped up with some political partisan baggage.
Hmm.
Um, it's certainly not always wrapped up with an intellectual life, unfortunately.
Yep. That's right.
And so, how are you when people ask you, what do you mean by a Christian organization? What do you say?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And to be honest, we even at the board level had huge pressure early on to kind of take Christian out of the name,
Hmm.
because we are actually trying to build a flourishing environment that includes all people in these places. Like, and that's actually kind of deeply part of the Christian witness is like we are going to build things that will bless you, and we're happy that you're part of our community because you're my neighbor, and this place wouldn't be the same without you. And
Hmm.
so we are building structures that will bless the nations, that will bless everyone that's not just a Christian. And the reason I fought to even just put it in the name is that there's something that's deeply embedded, even in what it just means to be a Christian. Incarnation, certainly we're a deeply Christ-centered organization, and so what it means to be human, what it means to love like ecology and creation.
Hmm.
Um, all of that is deeply embedded, and it's not just those things aren't just generic. Like they're tied together and they're stitched together in a way that within our kind of mythology and our confessionality, that it actually is given coherence by being Christian. And so we wanted to create that coherence. Um, Now, what does it not mean? Um, it does not represent one particular brand of Christianity.
Hmm.
And so we've had it's just amazing to show up in these places, and depending on the culture or the place, you may have 60, 70% of our people that are, Latino and Catholic. At
Hmm.
our places in the Rio Grande Valley here in the Southwest. But you show up to rural Nebraska and you're talking Lutheran and Mennonite,
Hmm.
you know,
Hmm.
and we want both of those places to flourish from the Rio Grande Valley all the way up to the western slopes of Alaska. All of these places that we're embedded in, we would very much like Christ to fill and bless those places. And so we operate in a very much a non-sectarian space, but we're also very deeply, deeply committed to a Nicene Christianity, and a Nicene Christianity that flows out to the benefit of those around us.
Hmm.
Um, and so we've had a lot of debate. This is actually some of the areas that we can thicken on. Do we talk about a theology of place?
Hmm.
Do we just talk about a definition of place? Because all things it's not just a theology of place. It's just even how do you define what does it mean to flourish? What does it
Hmm.
mean to flourish as a family and as a town and as a county and as a nation? And which of those areas should we be focused on, and how does our own kind of Christian history inform us? Now, the various confessions have actually been very helpful. I would probably say that the closest definition that kind of infuses all things within Christian halls is a kind of Catholic social teaching on subsidiarity,
Hmm.
um, which I'll come back to that. But there's a little bit of the Reformed sphere sovereignty
Hmm.
that's in there. What's the difference between kind of a Kuyperian sphere sovereignty and kind of a Catholic subsidiarity? Um, and the reason I like subsidiarity is because it's not just a separation of powers like you see in spheres. It's actually an expectation of that hierarchy is there uh, to serve the lowest level. And so, why do we have nations? Well, ultimately to serve families.
Hmm.
Um, and also a sense that if you can do something within the resources that God has given you, and you choose to abdicate those, even though you were gifted the talents and the tools, that in and of itself is not legitimate.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
and so it really kind of shifts responsibility back to say, actually, God has given you everything that you need for this particular task. You need to do it,
Hmm.
not somebody else.
Yeah.
And so, but that's given us a really robust kind of cross-confessional opportunity to discuss um, even things like what do we mean by Christ-centered, and how does the incarnation really impact the way that we do things in real lived spaces? And I think that the Orthodox conversation has deeply, deeply contributed to our understanding of that.
Hmm.
As I've mentioned, subsidiarity, but even now, like we have many, many Reformed groups coming to us to saying, this is kind of what we mean by dominion, and this would actually be better with
Yeah.
what you're doing than kind of getting shaped into the kind of Christian nationalist conversation.
Yeah.
Because what we mean by this is that Christ infused into the good of these places is a social good for the good of our people, even if you're not a Christian. And so
Right.
those are the kinds of conversations that we want to stir up, and we would invite people to inform us because we're wide open for
Hmm.
conversation at this point. We
Yeah.
know that something is broken. We know that there's a better way of doing long-term diachronic change across the country, and we want people to join us in those conversations.
It's interesting. It's part of what you were saying made me think of a good brother. He's a priest, Anglican priest from Uganda, a friend of mine, Father Alexander, and he once said that whenever you pray something, be ready for the chance that you are the answer to what you're praying for, right? And
Mm,
for those of us praying for uh, civic and cultural renewal, for spiritual renewal, for the flourishing of our local places, well, crap, we might have to do it, right? I mean,
that's right.
there is this
That's right.
aspect of, all right, God, can you please fix all this? Well, you're there, aren't you? Right? I mean, and of course, in some cases, it's not. That's not everyone's calling in this
That's right.
sense. And
Hmm.
as you know, we're not naive, and we're not idealizing places. We're not idealizing the local to a point. But we don't want to forget about it. We don't want to forget about our local communities and what they need.
Yep.
And so much of this of what you're doing is responding to very specific needs in the given places. It's
Hmm.
responding to particular cultures, and I think exploring the different flavors, as you said, of Christianity, of a different. You're not sectarian. It's also important for place because I think about, so I live in West Michigan now, and certainly the Dutch Reformed tradition is a huge part of what it means to be here. Even if you're not, I mean, I'm Anglican, right? So but if I don't understand what it means to be Dutch Reform, I'm going to have less of a sense of my neighbors and what it means to
Yep.
be here. Like if you're in New Orleans or you're in South Louisiana and
Hmm.
you don't understand Catholicism or particularly that brand, if you will, that
Right.
culturally, right? That's really important. Or, in different places have different um, flavors in that sense. So I think it's really key here. But one of the
Hmm.
things that you've said in your mission, you've said on this podcast so far is this notion of local flourishing. Um, what does it mean? And again, this gets to the thicker conversation, the
Yep.
theological piece. What does that mean for the local to flourish? Right?
Yep.
Is it an economic thing to say?
Mm.
Uh,
Mm.
is it about security and safety? Is it about what do we mean with that? If a local place is
Hmm.
flourishing, what does it look like?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good pivot because I would say the first 2 or 3 years of us doing this, we were kind of looking at just a better way of doing formation.
Mhm.
We the outcomes from the tutorial model are just astoundingly better. We love the kind of formational community that we can build. We love the kind of life-givingness that this can give to faculty members and tutors who are like, man, I hate the educational system.
Yeah.
I don't want to be part of it.
Yeah.
And to be able to say, there's a better way of doing this. We'll make you an abbot. We'll give
Hmm.
you a
Hmm.
town. we focus very much on the human formational side of things. And I began, I would say, probably a year and a half ago to really ask the question, but why? I mean, there is something good about the intellectual life. It just has its own end,
Right.
and it's life-giving in its own. But is there a difference between me sitting at a small tutorial room in Notre Dame or Duke, or me sitting in a place in Brady, Texas?
Hmm.
Is there a difference? Because if there's not, then we should just all go do our tutorial stuff somewhere else.
Yeah.
Why the local component? Um, Now, I think that there can be very significant arguments made that the actual like incarnational piece of this is itself formational. Like there are things that instruct us just around the things that we eat,
Hmm.
and the places that we inhabit. But increasingly, I began to be pushed into form into the flourishing question. And I'll for the users that can, or the people that can see this, I'm going to share my screen and I'll talk my way through some of this for those who are not. Do you see this screen, Josh, that
Yeah, I
says
can see
human
it. Yep.
formation? So as we started to look at these different areas of education, and why would you want to build an honors college or a teacher college or a local seminary or a trade school or a medical school? Like these are all projects and programs that we have running all over the country. Why not why should we do local apprenticeship law school?
Hmm.
Or should we reserve that to kind of the halls of power and those kind of things? And so when is it legitimate to stay local? And when is it when do we need to kind of take our hands off the wheel? Um,
Hmm.
and so we started to talk about, these different models that we're using. And then we started to really lean into, well, what are the kinds of outcomes that we want to see? And so if I'm going to come in and deeply invest in civic life, um, what are the kinds of civic formation that will put my affections on my community and my place
Hmm.
in a way that I wouldn't get if I went off to the major state university, private university? And then how do we actually select the programs and partnerships from our different universities that we work with? And I didn't describe that earlier, but the basic model is that we have partnerships with universities that have allowed us to take their distributed programs, and rather than teach them as just an online section, we actually embed a lot of the formation opportunities into these local communities. Well, if I'm going to be involved in civics, and I had a guy at an honors college, a big state university here in Texas, who basically said to me, uh, and he's the dean of the Center for kind of Civic Leadership in this
Hmm.
large university. And he said, I hate to say it to you, Nick, but the absolute worst thing that you could ever do to create a deep affection and love for your place is to send people here to Austin.
Yeah.
We will teach them to despise their place.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and so there's this tension point between, well, we want them here so they can learn, but then we have to kind of continually remind them, like, you don't stay here. You shouldn't stay here,
Hmm.
And so even the way that we pick our academic partnerships. So let's just take one of these. Let's just say that I wanted to do um, I wanted to study, criminal justice. Well, why would I want to study criminal justice? Well, because we want just places,
Hmm.
right? Well, how do we? I guarantee you, not getting a bachelor's of science in criminal justice does not mean that you're going to be a just person or that you're going to contribute to a just society. But what does it mean to embed and study this program deeply within a community that's saying, well, in my community, in my place, these are the kind of things that we want, that we believe creates a rich, robust community that means to be human. Well,
Hmm.
why would I want to study criminal justice here? Well, maybe it's because young men moving out of high school that are wondering, I kind of want to play football, or I kind of want to be a cop, or I want to be involved in some sort of civic duty. And if you have to leave, get a degree from a particular university, disembody from your place, and then end up being contracted at some other place. You go
Hmm.
get contracted in Dallas. Um, what does it mean to have severed our affections from the people that made us?
Yeah.
And can we actually build a model that says, actually, the reason that I'm serving this community, the reason I've studied this degree, the reason I've taken this job is because I love my place. I love
Hmm.
my community, and I want this to be a just and happy and healthy and safe place. And I feel called. My vocation is to contribute to that. And it's not, it's, I don't feel called just to the idea of being a cop. I feel called because my vocation directly contributes to the good of my neighbor,
That's a
these
great way
people
to
that I
put it.
love.
I want to dig into that criminology or criminal justice example for a minute, because that's a great example. Like I just think about the different towns you can come from. If you, it's right the idea of being a cop, which you could be educated in somewhere else. Like these are the rules and laws, and this is kind of best practices, if you will. But it's different if I say I want to be a cop in this town, this particular town, because especially if it's the town you grew up in, it's not just a matter of knowing the laws. It's a matter of knowing the families and the people and the dynamics and the pressure points and places where you need to lean in and places where it might be like, okay, if I lean in too hard here, I'm going to cause some issues. Um, or where like I just think about if I were going to go back to my hometown in Monroe, Michigan, for example, and I wanted to be a criminal justice person or a cop, which by the way would be a disaster. I want to just relieve
Not my
everyone of
calling.
that horrible image. That would not go well. But I would want to know a lot about in the abstract, know a lot about human trafficking because unfortunately the corridor, the I-75 corridor, and also in Detroit and going from Detroit to Toledo, there's a lot there with human trafficking. The same thing is with drugs, fentanyl in particular, and meth being an issue there. So in the abstract, I'd want to know that. But then, there's something that going away to a police academy cannot teach you. It's that, okay, there's these families here in town and they seem to control some of the drug trade. And there's these areas in town that everyone talks about being dangerous. And it doesn't really fit the bill for your best practices, your abstract idea of um, where the crime happens. So, but because I have that local knowledge, I'm gonna be a better cop. Also, I think
Mhm.
too, and this has been an issue in criminal justice for years, but there's increasingly a distance between the law enforcement officers and the people that they're protecting.
Mhm.
Same thing is
Mhm.
true with firefighters. Same thing is true with with other groups like that, where I couldn't tell you a single cop here in Holland.
Mhm.
Um, they're all
Mhm.
in their cars. There's no sidewalk in my neighborhood, but like they don't walk. There's no police officers walking the beat or something like that. I think there is a sense in which we realize that there's a disconnect between some of these things. We're whether it's criminal justice or science or
Mhm.
teaching, so especially teaching, we're applying abstract formulas
Yeah,
to local particularities that don't fit.
that's right. That's
And
right.
so,
And that's where I would want to connect the human formational and the local flourishing piece
mhm,
is that there's something about being mentored by somebody who has, 30 years in my community,
mhm,
knows all of those things. Not only are you being blessed by the formational opportunity of being, just kind of sitting at the feet of this person, but you're also creating an environment that can be life-giving and a blessing to the mentor and to the
yeah,
tutor.
right, right,
Because otherwise, I end up alone, isolated, and retired. And all of this stuff that I've given, there's no opportunity of sharing it. And so I think that what we should be looking at is how does the human formational opportunities, the mentorship, the discipleship, the tutorial models, all those kind of things, how does that connect with the local flourishing component? And then suddenly, we've been talking about civic life. One of the really interesting components that we've seen, even in like child protective services or social services. Well, you want to talk about a disaster. Um, a disaster is coming out of a social work program that deeply believes that the state is a better parent than the real parents,
yep,
first of all. A broken vision of kind of the human space just to begin with. But then we're going to send you to a community that you know nothing about
mhm,
and then take their kids.
yeah,
Well, that's a good way to get shot.
Yeah.
Like that's a good way to, it's a disaster.
Hmm.
And so instead, why aren't we actually training these people from within the community? Because now it's like, Linda, I know you. Like
Yeah.
you know, we know that this is not great for your kids. Like, how can we actually do this in a way that is not creating an antagonistic state versus human kind of engagement, and rehumanizing the entire space? And so I
Hmm.
think that that's how the formational and flourishing components can come together. I do think that there are some key sectors here, like you mentioned economics.
Hmm.
I have become increasingly concerned that I may be able to offer any of the degrees in the canon. Like we've got over 500 degrees now in pretty much any sector. We've got accreditation. We can get the costs down, so nobody has to go into debt. We can do all this great stuff. But if we don't actually create economic drivers in these
Hmm.
towns, we're dead.
Yeah.
None of it's going to matter. And so how does my educational work in economics, business, those kind of things, commerce, how do we connect those so that what we're actually doing is training the people in virtue to love their place, connecting that with economic opportunities. So I was just in Southern California 2 weeks ago, talking to kind of hard industry like drilling, mining, some of these things, and asking the question like, what are the things that you need produced? And one guy was like, hey, I need about, 200,000 of these widgets produced a year.
Hmm.
And currently I'm like outsourcing it to China.
Yeah.
Um, Most of it can be done with 3D printing. And if
Hmm.
you could find a little town with, 5 or 6 guys that want to run a massive 3D printing shop and you want to train them how to do that, we'll give them a contract,
Hmm.
right? And so how do you start to look and connect these things holistically and say, well, if I can't figure out the economic drivers and if I can't train people to play within those economic drivers, I mean, all of us see the AI thing just like a wave that's coming to knock
Hmm.
off, tons of jobs. Well, how do I train virtuous people that want to live and love their place and give them economic activities or train them in ways to say, actually, you can build this town.
Yeah.
You can build this town and now you can bless other people. Those are not typically conversations that people have when they go to university
Hmm.
because they're not really factoring in a critical component of I could choose this or I could choose that. I've got A or B. Which one is going to lead to a better social outcome for my people?
Hmm.
And instead, we're choosing particularities. We're choosing individualism. We're saying, well, I think that I can go create max value for myself disembodied from any other kind of social impact for my family, for my community, for my friends, for my people. And actually, maybe I can make a choice, an economic choice, be formed in a particular fashion that lends to a better community. And so those are all things that we want to bring together. And I just don't think that those things are incarnated or even possible at a, you know, Texas A&M or something.
Yeah.
So, anyways, that's kind of how we would bring together the human formational and local flourishing components of what we're doing.
Yeah. That's really, really tricky because there's a lot of layers there, and this is where I just want to encourage our listeners or viewers to, you know, make some comments or help us thicken this conversation because I think it's really, really important that economic side of it, especially the because you're absolutely right. So many of the students I always had, they were focused on how is the choice of this class and this major going to make me money individually, regardless of where I live.
Mhm.
There's a practical side to that I can see, but at the same time, there's also this aspect of okay, how am I acquiring skills that I could potentially use in the community I'm in right now, or at least take back home, right? If you're at a Christian halls, and you're a Christian hall and you're working on this particular major, it's great if we can think about how can we use that to have a lucrative career individually, but a flourishing community. Not that I don't succeed at the expense of my community. I succeed
Mm.
and my community succeeds at the same time. It's not a
Right.
either or. So how do we create that? But there's another side to this too, and I'm sure you're sympathetic to this because one of the things that's changing in the public higher education area, and I wanted to bring this up to you because I think it's relevant to what you're doing, is they're starting to cut a lot of the humanities in particular, and Ciceronian society is primarily the humanities. So we have public universities. Indiana comes to mind, where if someone graduating with this major, like let's say history or philosophy, doesn't make more than a high school graduate on average when they graduate from this program, we're going to cut that program.
Hmm.
So all these humanities programs are getting cut because, at least on one metric, they're not creating economic incentives. They're not economic drivers, at least on the individual level.
Mhm.
Now, we know from some data that I don't have in front of me that over time, a history or philosophy major actually does really well. But um, at least in the immediate point, right? There's no philosophy factory in the local town. So I'm wondering where the humanities fit in this model, because
Mhm.
it's kind of easy to see how the local flourishing can be seen with like criminal justice or with business or with
Mhm.
STEM, agriculture, teacher college, all that. I can start to see that practically, but
Mhm.
I don't think you disagree that we need philosophers and historians,
We do.
um,
Yep.
classicists. What do we do with that part of
Yep.
this story?
Yep. That's right. Well, and this does there's two ways of looking at this, and both I think are important. It should be said that I am not trying to do this to the exclusion of the research universities. I think that there is a benefit for people kind of the Oxfords and the Cambridges, in England. Well, there's a benefit to bring our best and our brightest together to really do great work together. I think we suffer when all of our good people get sucked out to the university and there's nothing left. So there's this balance. And for the humanities, uh, I'm increasingly convinced that the worst thing you could ever do in hiring a mayor is for somebody who's just studied mayorology, right?
Right.
I
Yeah.
mean, you want people who have the humanities and who have history and have virtue and have, a deep sense of like, what does it mean to be human and work within a place? That stuff is given to you by the humanities. Um, and I want, and I'm, it's a indictment on our communities when we have to hire a town manager who's not from our town,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And we're looking around and saying, oh, where are the experts? Well, who here knows our town?
Yeah.
And who actually here understands virtue?
Yeah.
And who do we trust? And who do we trust to not, embezzle all of our funds?
Hmm.
Um, and so I do think that the humanities as just a core functional layer of society continue to be critical to the point where I would say that I think they're going to be re-elevated at in the local community because we deeply, deeply care about virtuous people. And we see the impact when I'm walking around with other people that have just no sense of virtue and no sense of self-governance and no sense of it's created a low trust society where I say we actually have almost nothing in common. Um,
Hmm.
and so I do think that the humanities can be rejuvenated in place. Um, and then on that foundation, now we can talk about some functional roles. Well, do you need some more education? And we have a master's degree of civic administration, and we can like train you as in an apprenticeship model or even with a practicum model in the local mayor's office. I don't want to thrust you into that functional context until you are foundationally formed. But now I know the best young people in my town that are deeply gifted in this area. I want to identify them, I want to mentor them, and I want to deploy them functionally into our civic spaces. So I do think that there is a really significant opportunity to rejuvenate the humanities in places because most of the humanities and certainly most of the classics are best understood contextualized to a place.
Hmm.
Like it's hard to read Socrates. Why is this guy drinking hemlock and choosing to not run away
Hmm.
when given the opportunity, when he would rather die a citizen of Athens,
Hmm.
right? There's something that's deeply contextualized about where is he, who is he, where is he from? And so what does that mean for me to think about my community when I'm reading these texts, as opposed to kind of in a disembodied place So I think the humanities are so deeply foundational, they're so deeply human, and they're best read and understood when we're actually part of a living community. So my hope is, as a humanities guy, my
Mhm.
hope is that we can actually kind of rejuvenate what it means to be human as we read the humanities and apply them to specific contexts. I don't want to say that we do that at the detriment of doing really good hard work
Hmm.
in
Yeah.
the universities. I think that there's still a role for that. But I would rather see, of the where are we at now, 80,000 kids at the local state university. I look at that and I just wonder, would they be better formed there, or would they be better formed here in their places, especially in this kind of general education, humanities kind of context? And I'm kind of betting on the latter, right? I'm
Hmm.
betting that we can do just as good of a job on the academic side, and we can have a significantly improved social impact on the flourishing side.
One of the things I didn't think about this till just now, but one of the things a major university has been facing and responding to with different layers of bureaucracy and different teams and stuff is essentially what they're not calling it this, but I'm going to call it that. It's remedial education, right? There's a
Mhm.
lot of people who end up in college and universities, and I could see this happening in a Christian hall as well, where look, you want to do this, but you're not at the reading and writing level that you should be at this age. It may
Mhm.
not be your fault, probably isn't your fault. Um, so, where does I mean, I'm just wondering on a practical level, how has Christian Halls responded to this need to
Mhm.
do remedial stuff? Because on the one hand, if you're getting kids from the classical education movement, awesome. It's probably going to go a lot better because you don't have to reteach them how to read and write. But
Yeah.
look, let's face it, that's just not the case right now.
Yeah.
With a lot of people coming into college, they're you know in some cases functionally illiterate, but in other cases way way ahead. So
Yeah, that's right.
how does
That's right.
a model like this respond to that issue?
Oh, well, first of all, you're right that we just need to own it. I mean, there are massive differences um, depending on where you're coming from in your high school education. And the fact that we kind of treat everybody the same, like, oh, we're all kind of freshmen in college, is just ridiculous.
Yeah, right.
And so when we look at a place like I've got up on my screen for your listeners, a place like West Texas, we've got a consortium of halls called in the Permian Basin called Christian Halls Permian Basin, very focused on trying to solve the places for this very strange, very ugly West Texas oil and gas town,
Hmm.
right? And yes, finding the right partner universities and finding the right degrees are important. Um, I've got Inklings Hall, which is our local honors college, that is basically kind of if you're going to study honors, if you love great books, if your mom loves reading like the great text to you, this is basically where you're going to end up. And we now have programs in high school dual credit, bachelor's, master's, and we just started our PhD program, and we basically just created a little incubator for the intellectual life in West Texas. But let's face it, this is not a humanities town, right? This
Right.
this is a oil and gas town. It is the trades. It
Hmm.
is deeply blue collar, and it is very wealthy. Like this is not looked down upon to be blue collar. It's kind of looked down upon to be white collar,
Yeah.
actually. Because you can come in a context like our little trade school, Christ the Tradesman, if you want to be a millionaire in Midland, just start a plumbing company. Start an electrical company.
Yeah. It's the
Go
same in
go
West
into
Michigan too. Yeah.
yeah, go into welding and go into welding in the oil patch. You know, and so how do we create a virtuous environment where that can actually take place? Um, and because I'm looking at the community as a whole instead of just me. Because if it's just me, right, there's two programs that I'm going to run. It's Christ College and Seminary, which is our local Anglican infused theological college, right?
Hmm.
Bachelor's, master's, MDiv. Like we deeply, deeply care about forming our people in West Texas that want to minister here and live here and plant churches and be part of the religious life. That's probably my most natural fit for me personally. And then I
Yeah.
kind of move into Inklings. Well, if we only build this around me to give me my little place, we miss out on, Longfellow Hall, which is the, distinctly civics focused great books college, or Hawthorne Hall, which is really, truly missionally called to form every young teacher that comes into West Texas. Like that's the calling of this particular group of tutors. And so I think what it does to us is that it actually allows us to think kind of as a group and say, well, how has God called us? I mean, even like here's the Agora Forum, right? These were a bunch of homeschool parents that were like, yeah, we don't want all your set tracks. We want an aviation program. We
Ah,
want a dual
okay.
credit program. We're like, you know what? You
Okay.
homeschool parents, do it. You
Yeah.
guys, you guys know every tutor in this whole, community. You do it. And so, again, leaning into subsidiarity in a way that our universities have kind of leaned out from subsidiarity to say, no, we're going to create kind of the expert space. Well, what does it mean to be expert in local? What does it mean to really be an expert in what it takes for this community to flourish? And I don't think that these are opposing things. I think that we basically have two guilds. We have a local tutorial formational guild that have fundamentally set their affections on place. And then we have a professional guild that has said, actually, I want to go do the absolute best work in a community of scholars at the university. And those two guilds in North America have kind of been in competition, basically to the exclusion of the first. We
Mhm.
basically killed off kind of the local formational guild. And what I'm arguing for is that these two things can work together. We absolutely need a rich, robust pool of faculty members who are willing to do, top tier intellectual work, and then allow that to filter down to the benefit of our places. And we also need the people who are saying, I'm going to set my affections first and foremost on my people in my place
Mhm.
in conversation with the intellectual tradition. And I think that those are just different points of emphasis. And frankly, I love both. I mean, I would love to be, if you made me choose, I would be an abbot in a local abbey, right?
Yeah.
If you made
Mhm.
me choose, like that's where I would turn my affections first. But that does not mean I don't want to be in conversation with the intellectual tradition. And, I
Mhm.
spend about a month in Oxford a year, and, those are the kind of conversations I want to be part of, but I want to see that effectuated in real community.
Yeah.
And that's that I truly believe there are people probably listening to this podcast who in their heart they know God's called you to place first.
Mhm. Mhm.
And that's the kind of stuff that we want to open up some spaces for, because there hasn't been a lot of space in North America, in the American life, in the American story, for that kind of embedded and embodied tradition.
Well, and I think even apart from the because this what you're describing in Oxford, like you want that back here, right? That experience you're having, um,
Mhm.
that it's very much a driver for the Ciceronian Society as well. We find that ironically that at the major university, this is not always the case. They go and they want to experience that life of the mind, and it's just not there, right? Faculty
Right.
offices are closed. They avoid
Mhm.
each other. A faculty meeting is that's the stuff of nightmares. Depending
Right.
on where you're
That's
at,
right.
it's awful. But there also something you brought up too that I thought was interesting is one of the mistakes perhaps we've made is thinking that the college is for everyone in the way that we've designed it. Formation, education, development can be for everyone, but the remedial education that we're often having to do because they've been shortchanged on their development for reading and writing. Look, that may be the case with some folks, but some folks, look, there's nothing wrong with going into welding, right? In this sense, like there's nothing wrong with going into these trades. You mentioned welding, and I thought of this skit I saw on YouTube once where this guy has $100 bill and he sneezes into it and he says he's a welder. Right, they make we desperately need these people in every way, and we need them to be business savvy, good at customer service. They know how to,
Yeah.
and there's some great initiatives going on with this, and I think the local model can figure that out. Like, look,
Yeah.
you don't, it's, there's also the sense of being connected to a community that's willing to tell you that, right? Saying, look,
Hmm.
you're probably not going to be the scholar who goes and translates this hidden work or something. But man, when I asked you to come help me at my house to fix that, it was a game changer. That
Yeah.
is a gift,
Yeah.
right? That is something that so many of us cannot do. Um, and so I think there is the way that Christian halls and this local model, this local tutorial model, can respond readily and easily to local needs is very distinctive in a way that I don't think is you're going to find as much in a large university. Yeah, you can collect your data and your education consultants can come in and say, these majors look like they have metrics that will do this, this, and this, which is usually bull
Hmm.
crap. They're preparing for an economy that doesn't exist yet and may never
Yep.
actually happen.
That's
Um,
right.
so a local model is able to say, look, it looks like this is where we're headed here.
Hmm.
And so that's going to be really valuable. And I'm encouraged by that. So
Well,
yeah, go ahead and respond.
yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's where it's actually where groups like Ciceronian become so really amazingly fundamental in terms of the opportunities that we're looking at because um I think of it a little bit like guilds of specialization. If I'm going to come in and I'm sharing my screen again here, that if I'm looking at a particular impact sector, let's just take, for example, the arts. My brother's PhD is in operatic performance,
Hmm.
studied primarily Italianic opera.
Hmm.
And his thesis, after going through the standard American educational process, was that you simply cannot create a Pavarotti in a petri dish at a university. Like it actually
Interesting.
takes like
Yeah.
5 generations, Fernando, his father, and the singing group that they were part of to actually build a culture from which a Pavarotti can emerge.
Mm. It's interesting.
And so
Yeah.
there's actually like just even fundamental organic limitations to what you can do in 4 years at a university, as opposed to like an entire multi-generational culture that you're part of, that you're bred within, that you're grown within. And so some of those things become very interesting. And then you start to look at it and say, well, we want to have the arts or we want to have humanities deeply infused in our place, but who are the people that are really good at this? And I think that that's where we can start to look at where are those emerging almost sub guilds. And Josh, because I didn't have your permission, I didn't put it up here, but Ciceronians should be here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like these are the Circe Institute, Colson Fellows, Classical Conversations Moms, Center for Pastoral Theologians, ACCS professors. These are all people who have dedicated enormous amounts of time and training and formation, and many of them are coming to us saying, like, I was trained in this stuff. I don't have a deployment vehicle to do what I was trained for.
Yeah.
And so you could look at the Colson Fellows, they're kind of in public theology and worldview and a little bit of civic stuff.
Hmm.
Well, that's 8,000. They have 8,000 alums.
Hmm.
Average age is 68 when they
Oh,
graduate.
okay. Yeah.
So they're older, they're wealthy,
Hmm.
they're looking for kind of a deployment in their community, and they don't know what to do with what they've been trained in.
Yeah.
And so this is where we can come in and say, actually, in these different, yes, for the different sectors, but also for the different humans that are out there, how do we kind of identify them and give them a role, give them a task, and say, you have deep meaning, you have deep value for your community. And the response that I've received from these people has just been like, it's the first time anyone's ever asked me to do something that is deeply meaningful.
Mm.
And again, this is just creating an ecosystem where people can say, I don't want to go away to the university. I want to be here. I want to be embedded in my place. Give me a structure. Give me something that I can do. And our culture has basically not been able to create those organic structures. It hasn't been created to create the kind of singing group that would create a Pavarotti, or the kind of voluntary associations that create like deep civic engagement. And that's really what we're trying to stimulate, which is why I really don't think CHI is really that novel of an idea outside of the American experiment.
You're right. Yeah.
It's novel here, but it's kind of like a duh anywhere else that I go in the world. They're like, well, isn't that just how you do stuff? And we're like, well, not really here. We don't really
Yeah.
do stuff that way here. And so I hope that we can turn the conversation back to that kind of thinking, and that we can really thicken the conversation in, what does it mean to flourish, and how do we do that? And is it really a top-down thing? Can think tanks in Washington actually create flourishing? And I think we've reached the limitations of what kind of top-down modalities can give us. I do want to say one thing though, that there is a danger of kind of parochialization. There's a danger of kind of turning our affections so close to ourselves that we lose any kind of sense of otherness as well.
Mm.
And I do believe that even in like the Great Commission, we've been blessed to bless others. I believe that flourishing local parishes should ripple out to flourishing counties,
Mhm.
should flourishing out to ripple out to state, nation, and world. And so I'm not trying to create isolationism. I'm just trying to say that the baseline default for a civilizational movement is uh, people that are deeply human in their place.
Yeah.
And if you can build that, then that can ripple out to civilizational renewal. If we don't remember that, then we also end up with, we end up without a George Washington,
Mhm.
somebody who is like both deeply formed kind of in his own community, deeply loves Virginia,
Mhm.
deeply loves his home. He actually has a home to go back to.
Yeah.
That's
Right.
what's amazing is when he turns back give back the presidency, he actually has a place to go home.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
but he also has a deep understanding of civic duty that takes him away from his home. And I think we talked about this last time. I feel like the dominant narrative in America is like the first half of the Odyssey. Jonathan Pageau actually gave me this whole image. It's not my own, but with respect to him, it's the first half of the first half of the Odyssey where it's always leaving,
Yeah.
it's always going away. It's always adventurism. It's always westward expansion. It's always international adventurism. It's
Mhm.
always out. And we forget, fortunately, George Washington did not, that Penelope and Telemachus, and in his case, his wife, are waiting, and they're
Mhm.
saying, "You've done your duty, come home."
Yeah.
And I hope that that can be the kind of life-giving breathing in and out of even our national duties, because our national duties are infused and given lifeblood by our local presence. And so I think that that's how we would actually balance out human formation, local flourishing, and civilizational renewal.
That's really good. And I think it makes me think of there's this quote from Irving Babbitt, a literary critic from over 100 years ago at Harvard, who said something to the effect of, "We're often trying to be superhuman before we know what it means to be human, or we're trying to be a global citizen before we even know what it means to be a citizen of the street I'm
Yeah,
on." Right.
that's
And
right.
so we're reaching for that giant picture before we even know how to live in this particular
Mhm.
moment, this particular place.
Yeah.
But you're right. It's not isolationism. It's like, look, you're not ready for that. You're trying to do it, but how in the world? I mean, this is biblical, right? I mean, I've given you responsibility over a few things so that you can be prepared to have responsibility over these larger things. And so we need to start somewhere, but we're trying to skip that in many ways. And I think that's really important. There's a lot of images we could come back to, but I want to finish with this before I let you go. If someone's listening to this and they want to get involved, they want to be part of what Christian Halls is doing, what do they do? Where do they go?
Well, you can come visit us at christianhalls.org. It's our kind of our website, christianhalls, halls.org. And that'll, take you through a lot of our mission and our vision, as well as all of the different university partners and the places that we're at. The We have many different needs that are beginning to emerge in the human kind of the human capital space. Certainly the lowest level, the most subsidiarity level, and by lowest I mean most honored, I would
Mhm.
say,
Yeah, yeah.
is in kind of a subsidiarity hierarchy, is the tutor. People who love the Christian intellectual tradition, who love the intellectual life, who love their place and are willing to say, I'm going to hang out my shingle. Come study with me. One of the most one of the most memorable moments I had in Oxford was when I was studying Syriac, and my professor had said, or one of my professors had said, "Hey, go knock on this door, and this guy would love to read Syriac with you, and knock on the door, and this old guy with massively white hair flying everywhere. He's like, oh, I heard you wanted to read Syriac. It's wonderful." And Sebastian Brock is basically like the god of Eastern, Syriac Christianity. And he's retired and he's emeritus
Mhm.
and he's no longer lecturing. He's no longer formally tutoring. What an opportunity! What a privilege to sit with retired guys like him, John Lennox, a couple times a month at Wycliffe. Um, uh, People that have committed their life to the intellectual tradition and are now looking to give it back. And I would say that that is a deeply honorable role. And
Mhm.
for some of your listeners or people to say, you know what, I'm gonna do some humanities tutorials in my town. And kids can knock off their English comp and their world civ and their American history and their philosophy classes before they ever have to hit a campus, and they can transfer those in. I would say give us a contact at Christian Halls. That's fundamental to what we do, and we frankly need to have the nation's largest network of connected, well-trained tutors to really change this country. And so that's where I think certainly the Ciceronian Society is kind of a cornerstone. This is why I joined, it's why I committed my membership there, because I do think it is the natural gathering point for people that look at this and say, actually, yes, it is tradition, and yes, it is place, and yes, it is things divine. And
Mhm.
that's, the why I gave the speech that I did at this last conference. But one level up from that, um, there there is a role for that kind of organizing uh, personality that God
Yeah.
has given certain people. Actually, you're phenomenal at this, Josh. That just naturally gifted to gather and create collective impact.
Mhm.
And some of us don't create collective impact very well. We create individual impact because come study with me. I'd love to read, John of Damascus with you. That'd be
Mhm.
wonderful. But actually, certain people are gifted in collective impact, knowing how to gather people together, create shared identity, create culture, which is what you've done with the Ciceronian Society. And so I would say if there's people out there that would look around their community and say, I know I can get 5 or 6 people. I know that I can kind of create a little mini shared space of tutors and people and students for the good of my place. We would definitely want to talk to you. And then finally, as we've grown now, um, we're going to be in 300 sites across North America by the end of the year. We have a role called a field guide, which is really people who deeply love this conversation. They deeply love the tradition, and they're looking around their region and they're saying, okay, what would it look like for us to not just have one humanities hall, but actually Southern California or the Rio Grande Valley, we really need to have kind of a network of abbeys in our community. And we're asking people, as we have now hundreds and hundreds of these directors and tutors coming to us, people who would be interested in kind of engaging in that kind of social design, in looking at their community kind of at writ large and saying, well, up here in Dutch Reformed Upper Midwest,
Mhm.
what do we need for Michigan and the surrounding areas to flourish?
Mhm.
And actually, we probably need several of these to create an impact center around
Yeah.
our area. And the people that are doing theology are probably not the people that need to be doing, criminal justice. And so to start to think through more kind of large scale regional structures and help us identify who are those directors, who are those tutors, and how can we really train them and deploy them. Again, all within a very strong subsidiarity model. The field guides are not in charge of the directors or in charge of the tutors. It's really a service posture to say, what would it look like? Almost like a group of Benedictine monks. They're
Mhm.
looking across Northern Europe in the 400, 500, 600s and saying, man, what would it look like to really infuse our tradition back into the lifeblood of our civilization. And so if any of those roles resonate with your audience, I'd certainly encourage them to jump on the website, send us a message, because we are in we're in full on growth mode, and we need people that love what we're doing and would want to participate.
That's so great to hear. Nick, it's always a pleasure. Thank you so much, sir.
My pleasure. We'll look forward to talking to you again.
You've been listening to The Sower, a production of the Ciceronian Society. As a reminder, we have a second podcast discussing Cicero's seminal work, On Duties. That is released every Wednesday morning. Be sure to take a look at that one as well. We also have the Fall Symposium, and if you like this conversation, that's going to be a great conference for you. It's all about moral and intellectual formation, so please look into that. We also have the Spring Conference, not to mention our Journal Pietas and the annual Herbert Storing Prize, the new Logres Institute, and much more. Make sure to sign up for our newsletter to stay on top of everything involving the Ciceronian Society. And don't forget to rate and review this podcast, share it with your friends, and check out our website at ciceroniansociety.org. Thank you for listening.